shot from Curry with 0.6 of a second remaining. The brilliant shooting of Steph and Curry continues. Back to Breen, into the hands of Sprewell. Fast break down to Weber. He turns. Look up behind the back. And the step and the foul. What a play by Weber.
I've never seen a shooting display like this. Never.
37 in a quarter. Curry splits the defense behind the back, fires a three. Oh, he puts it in! What a spectacular move! That could be the greatest move I've ever seen. Here's Curry for the record. It's good! There it is! Stephen Curry! The all-time three-point king in the NBA!
Fuck it! We'll do it live!
You are in the Warriors Huddle with me, Bram. No Marcus today, but with me per usual, my master of all things sound and video, Maxime.
How's it going?
Maxime, I'm fired up to announce the exact man we need today. The former Golden State beat writer for the Bay Area News Group, the current West Coast specialist for NBA.com, a remarkably close friend of this show, and a newly engaged man, Mr. Mark Medina. What's going on, Mark?
Bram, not much other than, hey, I'm making that next step. Thankfully, Val said yes. We took a weekend getaway in Tulum over Thanksgiving weekend, and perfect trip with a perfect ending. And I almost feel like I won't ever know what it's like to win an NBA championship. But if I had to imagine, I felt like I could relate somewhat to what the Warriors had gone through in recent years whenever they've hoisted the Larry O'Brien trophy here. So I'm on cloud nine.
I respect this. I feel like if the camera pulled out, we'd see that your fiance was in the room, very closely monitoring that you handled this that statement right. Did she see it coming, Mark? So, like, did you? I mean, I'll keep it personal. By the time I asked my wife, we've been together for a while. She knew it was coming. You know, I tried to head fake her. In fact, the story didn't go perfectly well for me. But you know, anytime I got close to bending down, she knew what was happening. For you, you know, like, was it a nervous thing? Like, you weren't sure how it was going, or was it kind of already preordained? Did she know? Did she know the question was about to be popped?
Well, to answer a few questions, I was not nervous. You know, not only have we been together for a few years and it's been a great partnership, but, you know, I prepare for this moment. I knew how to deliver in the clutch here. But more seriously, did we see it coming? Look, we had talked about it. We, worked together with getting the right piece of jewelry. We also talked about, hey, let's do a weekend getaway to Tulum where, you know, sometimes things like this happen, but I never officially said, yes, I am going to ask you this question when we're vacationing in Tulum. And so it's one of those things. Val definitely saw it coming, but I guess as many can attest when they go through this, it's one thing to anticipate it. It's one thing to experience it. And even if you know it's coming, it's one of those things of those unknowns. You don't exactly know when it's going to happen and in what setting. So yeah, it was a perfect way to end 2022. I would say this: it was a perfect way to end 2022 and then cap it off with this podcast just a few days before Christmas.
Oh, look at that professional work. I'm sure that people didn't tune in to hear it about wedding proposal stories. So I'll keep this as our last shot in this in particular category. But no, it's weird as shit, dude. I walked around. I brought Erica to a winery, walked around with the ring in my pocket, and I was fingering that fucking ring like Gollum holding the ring. Like, I kept thinking I was going to lose it. And the location I picked, and when Erica came to, we're supposed to have a picnic there, she looked down and said, "This is right by the freeway, dude. Why are we sitting here?" And like the whole plan got thrown out, you know, like it was like, oh my God, ran off to the other side of the winery, had my little prepared speech. And as I started it, she said, "Why are you using your speaking voice? This is awkward." So, you know, we're happily married, Mark. It all came together. Let's flip to basketball. And I tell you what, man, I need you. Okay. This feels like I'm doing this from the inside of a time machine. I don't know if I'm in the Cohan era again, right? No, the Warriors just had their first 30-point back-to-back ass smashings since 2001. You know, I have defense mechanisms. I've seen this movie before. I've dealt with it, but I don't know. I need some rosiness. So before we even go to the glass half full or empty, off the court report? You have anything? We haven't seen you for a while. Do you have anything to help shift our focus here a little bit?
Yeah, well, look, as you know, Bram, I'm always about keeping it real here, and it's fascinating about the Warriors. I think this is definitely a perfect time to get into half glass full, half glass empty, because there's a lot of gray area of what to make of this big picture. But here are a few things to boost your spirits. I did a roundtable type of article promoting the Christmas Day games coming up with the ESPN announcers, with Mike Breen and Doris Burke and Jeff Van Gundy. And Mike Breen, a guy who's a pro's pro, he calls a lot of games, he sees a lot of teams. He still sees the Warriors among the mix of teams that he thinks that could get out of the Western Conference to get to the NBA Finals. And I will read you this direct quote from him. He said, "The Warriors are going to be a force to be reckoned with so long as Steph Curry is not out for too long of an extended period." And he said these young guys, whether you're talking about Jonathan Kuminga or Moses Moody, are the type of athletic young players that can be a real boon for them. So I'm looking at it as it might be a positive for them. Now, here are some qualifiers. His statement itself is a qualifier, and he also delivered that statement earlier in the week before those two consecutive losses in New York against the Knicks and the Nets. But not to dampen on that, I think he was talking about big picture, knowing that, before, as he was speaking those words and after, there were going to be a lot of ups and downs short term.
Maxime, is he allowed to say not to dampen all that after he completely dampened it, after he threw like 4 buckets of water? That felt like the Liv story again, Mark. You got me all fucking fired up, like, oh, this is great. This is good news. And then whoop, out came the rug from underneath me. This was before the 30-point losses. Maxime, how you doing, dude? We haven't heard that much from you. I mean, how are you feeling as we embark on this podcast here?
It's getting harder and harder to remain my level of optimism. I was arguing on behalf of Mike Breen's perspective, even though I didn't totally know it until just now. But I felt like we were 2 peas in a pod. But it's been eroding, as I feel like those back-to-back ass whoopings have put us in a situation where it's pretty hard to defend that take at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we're not here, right? I mean, they're hurt. That last game, everybody was hurt across the boards. We didn't have any of the people who make the Warriors the Warriors. So there's reasons for optimism. It's not like the sky is necessarily falling, but we're also running out of runway. Whenever it is that Steph comes back, whenever it is when the Warriors hit that championship gear we all secretly think they're going to hit, there's not going to be a lot of space left for them to take off. And so it's starting to get a little bit concerning. I got a question for you, Mark. It's another random one. So this is my bitterness. This is my West Coast bias. I have never attended a game at Madison Square Garden. I took a tour of it, which means I obviously respect it, but I've never been there. But my entire life, I've gotten bitter when people say like, oh, the Garden, like it's the most important spot. It's where players want to have their biggest days. They talk about Jordan's performances there and Steph's performances there. You do this shit for a living. You have probably gone to all of the arenas. When you go to the Garden, does it feel like hallowed ground, or is it just, another stadium, man? It's just another spot to play hoop.
Yeah, I've gone full circle on my experience going to the Garden. My first trip to Madison Square Garden was when I was at Syracuse as a junior in college. I was covering the Syracuse basketball team for the student paper, the Daily Orange, and they would go to the Garden for the Big East tournament, or if they're playing St. John's. So I was there specifically for a game against St. John's. And at that point, honestly, the place was a asshole, if you know what I mean. Like, I thought this arena is overrated. Like, it's not well.
Wait, I don't know what you mean. What's an asshole?
Well, yeah. It was a dump. And I was like, why is this revered and seen as the mecca of basketball, right? But it was one of those things where at that point in time in 2007, the arena wasn't up to speed with amenities. It wasn't as well kept. And I don't know the exact timeline, but I know after that, they started upgrading the facility. It was better kept so that, by the time I was covering different NBA beats, first the Lakers and the Warriors, and I would go to the Garden, you did feel like there was this mystique to it. But honestly, it was always these weird, different emotions. I mean, when you're going to New York as a traveling beat writer, it's fun in and of itself because you're getting a taste of the big city. You're able to, meet with friends and do some extra shopping at nice stores, all that stuff. And then that ambiance carries over to the arena. But a lot of times you would just see terrible basketball because the Knicks were always so dysfunctional. So it's almost like this facade that it was enticing enough for the visiting team to feel it. But if you're there day to day, it starts feeling really stale, right?
That makes sense.
So, yeah, I think it's great, but I think objectively, even though the Knicks have been, really good as of late, because of their turbulence the last few decades, I know the people that are there on a day-to-day basis always would roll their eyes when they would hear the cliches of, oh, MSG is the mecca of basketball, and all these people waxing nostalgic about the memories there, because the memories at that arena very rarely have ever included hoisting a Larry O'Brien trophy. It's usually been the other team's best player putting together an MVP type performance at the Knicks' expense.
Have you ever watched a documentary that you knew would be amazing if it was like an hour and a half as opposed to the 2.5 hours that it was? Like, it had all this gold in it, but it ended up being kind of too long and fat. That was like my tour through Madison Square Garden. It was dope. Like, when we saw the court, everything was cool, but they also showed us things like, here's the lines the soda runs through. Like, who gives a shit about the logistics of a stadium? I remember being super frustrated about that. All right, boys, back to Warriors basketball. And let's do a little glass half full. Mark, you remember this? We look back and give us something you like, something you don't about Warriors hoop. I'll cherry pick because there's not a whole lot of options. The thing I like, Wiseman's 30 spot, right? So the back-to-back losses felt like the moments during a car accident when everything slows down and you can see everything go really, really, really poorly. And watching Wiseman put up the highlights we're currently watching here on the video was like watching somebody do like a ballet performance during a freeway crash. It was like some level, some upside, some beauty in an otherwise tragic and terrible fucking thing. I will acknowledge, look, I'm sure everyone's thinking garbage time points. They were. A lot of this happened when nobody gave a shit, but I'll also acknowledge I don't give a shit when it was. 30 points during an NBA game while he was dealing with what he's been dealing with, all these questions surrounding him, I am on board for. So what do I like? I like James Wiseman going 12 for 14 and putting up a 30 spot. Hopefully changing his trajectory in the league. What do you boys got?
Well, my half glass full has nothing to do with what we've seen on the court. It involves Steph Curry and the fact that he didn't need surgery on his shoulder. And look, this might wind up being a problem later on. We don't know. But I think that there is some optimism that, once Steph Curry comes back, whenever that is, he's going to be normal Steph Curry and pick up right where he left off. And that while we don't know how much longer he's going to be out, it's not going to be beyond a few more weeks. I mean, I've been told that he's going to be evaluated probably sometime later next week. And now when these evaluations happen, that doesn't mean, okay, there's this window for him to come back now all of a sudden. It is more of, okay, now he's cleared for either non-contact drills or individual workouts or, heaven forbid, even going back to practice. But that's the thing. I mean, I was talking to an opposing team's executive the other day and just picking that person's brain about just different things going on with different teams and gain a sense of the landscape. And we talked about the Warriors. I mean, he was kind of having these same conversations we've been having on this podcast, and you guys have had in other episodes of, how worried should you be and what do you make of all this weird stuff? But his ultimate conclusion was that, betting against the Warriors is as foolish as betting against LeBron James. And Bram, I know that you love betting against LeBron James, but sometimes you've come to regret that, right?
Don't worry about that.
It should be for the same reason. And when we're talking about LeBron James and the Lakers here, like, no one's ever saying don't bet against LeBron James because he'll be able to lift the Lakers. It's more of don't bet against LeBron James of, hey, he'll continue to be able to delay father time here. So when it's saying don't bet against the Warriors, that specific opposing team executive still sees that window that, as messy as it looks right now in the short term, in the long term, they can sort itself out because mainly of Steph coming back and then Klay Thompson looking like Klay Thompson of pre-injury, Andrew Wiggins coming back, Draymond Green doing his thing, and then the young guys maybe not being set up to carry the franchise, but not being a liability completely.
I keep waiting for you. I want to cut you off before you finish that by saying also that executive told me that before the back-to-back 30-point losses. So it says we'll never know. We'll never know when that was delivered to you.
Okay,
And,
I will confess.
No. Wait, you just I'm trying to cut you off. But Maxime, quickly talk.
Said
Quickly
it,
talk. We don't
said
have
it
this information.
before the New York losses.
We do not. God damn it, Mark. This is not going to be our theme. This is not going to be our theme. Maxime, erase that. Somehow go back. Forget that it's live. What do you got, man? Something you like, something you don't.
I alluded to my optimism waning or getting chipped at, and I think one of that came from texting with my buddy about, hey, look, my optimism is basically that the starting five is still the best lineup in the league. And so what we're dealing with is not necessarily that our starting five is not capable of winning a championship. The problem is that the rest of the pieces aren't quite adding up yet. And so maybe that's a little bit of a segue into what we know is the title of this podcast, or Trade Options for Golden State. The question really then becomes, how can we deal with the support? We talk about wanting to be able to support Steph, but that's also true for the rest of the starting five. They're pulling their weight, they're doing their job. We want to make sure that we can give them the pieces around them that actually help us get to a title at this point.
And I will take Maxime's very well subtle suggestion to get towards the actual option on this. Although I will add something I don't like. I don't like that either of you haven't complimented me on my brand new jacket. I mean, I'm fucking very clearly sporting the jacket, and no one said.
I love the jacket. I love the jacket. Where did you get it? Can I buy it?
Hot is what I can tell you. I don't need this jacket at all. I'm so hot. I've been wearing it only for a compliment, and I had to bring it up on my own. So maybe down the line, bring that back up. So I'll push it to our golden questions, and we have one here. All right. The one I'm going to work my way to is, quote, Huddle Dogs. Let me pause for a second. I love that somebody called us that. I hope that happens a lot. Huddle Dogs, do you think the Warriors should make a trade? But before we get there, Mark, let me ask you a different one, because it's going to help set up the trade questions. This is the first question, and it's an entertaining one. Quote, love the show. Thank you. But I have to say that your beard looks like it makes your face smell like yogurt. Let me pause again. I don't feel like I have a very deep beard, and I don't know why anybody's face would smell like yogurt. So that's kind of an FU, but is what it is. Off it goes. Wiseman looked league-wide doubt in the face and told it to fuck itself. Does the 30-point effort change how you think of him? So, Mark, I'm going to switch this, and I'm going to make it a lead into the trade question. Here's my question that I'll pull out of this. Does this performance, that 30-point performance, do you think it changes the perception of GMs of Wiseman around the league? Is one big night, and he has a big one, 12 of 14, is that enough for people to be a little bit more enticed, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not going to discount, I think the significance of what it can have for James Wiseman's confidence and momentum lead into future games. But his 30-point performance in and of itself against Brooklyn, I don't take away that much. It's a relative net upgrade to when he was dominating the G League. But the reality is the Warriors got their ass handed to them because they're undermanned. And once the Nets clearly established that setting that this is how it was going to be, even without Kyrie Irving, it was garbage time and guys not playing as hard as and engaged as they would be. So there was some element of empty calories, and as great as Wiseman looked in that game, there are also the kind of the typical mistakes that he had as well, as far as defensive rotations and things like that. But I think that in the big picture, again, the momentum of how he can carry this through can be substantial. But I don't think it's going to be, hey, you know what, the market is never going to be hotter now. So if I'm Bob Myers, I'm calling other GMs and saying, hey, what can I do to flip Wiseman here?
Go ahead, man. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I know that internally there's some school of thought that, of a few things. I think that they are adamant that a lot of Wiseman's hiccups have mostly to do that he hasn't had opportunities to play because of two things. He had his injury-riddled season last season. And unlike other rookies or young players in the league, he's on a team that has a lot of good players, and it's a good team. It's not like he's with the Houston Rockets where you can just play through whatever mistakes you get whatever numbers you have. So I think that there's an element there, but there's also another element that there's an expectation, optimism that if they develop him enough that he's good for 10, 12 minutes with the other all-stars in the playoffs, like that's considered a victory.
Absolutely.
It's not about, hey, let's get him 20, 30 minutes for the playoffs and he's carrying it. So it's kind of that in between. So I think in that respect, this is the beginning of that process, but the snapshot alone doesn't mean that much.
Yeah, it's a step towards JaVale McGee. I mean, here's if I was Bob Myers and I was having conversations towards people, right? Here's what I would say. So we've used the phrase garbage time. What's garbage time? Garbage time is a combination of a lack of pressure, right? And an availability of time. Do whatever the fuck you want. It doesn't matter. What I just described, man, is the path of almost the entire game, all 48 minutes of most lottery teams. It's the Houstons of the world, is what you just said. It's exactly what Wiseman's never been afforded. If he had gone number 2 to a shitburger team and was now playing in Houston, was now playing in these teams that were trying to lose, what he would be given is a surplus of garbage time. And he just showed us that he's capable of dominating in it. So of course it's one game. And of course it's at the back end of a game. Nobody gave a shit, but maybe it's a glimpse into who he could be if he wasn't playing for a title contender immediately with all of these expectations, but I tell you what, let's finally get to the trade stuff. So we have some suggested trades. The segment here, Mark, is Who Says No? All right. So let's pull up ESPN's trade machine. Maxime, make sure that the money works. Here's the, as Jason Dumas told us last week, the pipe dream for the Warriors. This one's Jay Crowder for James Wiseman. So I'm sure that the money works. We'll see it as it pops up. Mark, let me put it to you. If the Warriors gave Phoenix a call, not everything's super rosy with DeAndre Ayton and Monty Williams. They might want a young center. What do you think? Who says no? Jay Crowder for James Wiseman.
Honestly, I don't think either team would say yes to it because. So here I'll walk you through it. From the Warriors end, I think philosophically, and this would include this deal. I think the Warriors have been sensitive to as much as they want to give the best chance for their current crop of stars to win a championship, they also want to protect their long-term future, and so that's where I think the rubber's going to meet the road, not just with this trade, but in general. But I think at the Suns' end, as much as obviously things haven't worked out, and I don't know the exact parameters of why, because it's very puzzling. I mean, Jay Crowder is a very valued veteran, and even though can sometimes be feast or famine as far as his outside shot, he is a positive role player, right? Yeah. But I think that incorporating a young player into a team that already has had to deal with different levels of volatility, I don't think that they would feel like they would be able to absorb his growing pains. And while, there might be less pressure because they have DeAndre Ayton as a center, there might be this feeling of, well, what's the point of this, right? So I don't see it happening, but I guess you never know.
Well, there's also the FU angle from Phoenix. I can't imagine they want to help Golden State at all. If I'm the Warriors, if you had this conversation 2 weeks ago, I think I'm saying yes. And I think I'm saying yes pretty fast. Now with Steph's health, kind of a weirdo question mark. Like, we don't necessarily know what the missing puzzle piece is because we don't know what the puzzle looks like entirely. We haven't been able to see it. So this is a hell of a trade-off. I mean, what's Jay got left? A couple of years for a guy whose upside might still be there. It's not a definite yes the way it would have been for me a couple weeks ago. Maxime, what do you think, dude? Would you say yes from either side?
Well, I mean, we got John Hollinger giving us professional analysis here and saying that we would decrease Phoenix's win totals by 10 and we wouldn't impact Golden State's win totals at all. Or other way around, I'm sorry. But nonetheless, it's not looking good in terms of the analytics. But I do think that there is we got to try something here. And we'll see how we go through these other trades. But I'm not seeing that much in this landscape. And I might actually think that Jay Crowder would ultimately be slightly more positive than not affecting the winning percentage of a team at all. So in a vacuum, maybe not, but given the rest of the trade landscape, this might be a move that pushes us in the direction of a W.
Mark, is there any truth to the rumor that Bob Myers actually just goes to the ESPN trade machine, plugs it in, and then just looks at Hollinger's analysis like, oh, no effects, I'm out. Or like he said, -11.
I mean, how do you think they got Kevin Durant? It was all just doing trade machine simulations.
Exactly.
And not,
right.
being a savvy salary cap tactician and negotiator and relationships. It was just hitting the button. That's all it was.
Maxime, hit start over for me. Let's give Mark a new one. So put the Warriors right back in as team one here. I always have a weird thing, by the way. I use this trade machine all the time, and it always has to be the Warriors as the first team. I'm like Rain Man in that sense. I'd panic if we didn't do number one. And as the second team, let's get Chicago up.
I can do this.
I know that you can. This time, throw Alex Caruso straight up for James Wiseman. Try this trade for me. Boom. It's successful. Mark, what do you think, man? Who says no? Straight up, Caruso for Wiseman. A little bit of perimeter defense takes over where GP2 left off. Also has a little bit of savvy. They could trust him. Doesn't know the system, but he seems like a read and react guy. What do you think, man? Who says no?
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, I like this deal because Alex Caruso is all about the intangibles. He's a smart basketball player. As weird as it sounds, I know the Wall Street Journal made a big deal about it a few years ago. Historically, he's had the best plus minus with LeBron James compared to any other pairing that LeBron's had of his career. And I think that he can mitigate some of the short-term things with, Klay Thompson trying to get back into form. He can offshore some of the issues as far as his defense goes and all that. But again, I know just how the Warriors are thinking that they want to, really ride this out. And they feel that, with more games played, that Wiseman's going to get better. Again, not substantially a game changer, but at least enough in the short term that he can play some spot minutes with the All-Stars come playoff time. And that, this will yield a lot of long-term success down the line, where in Alex Caruso's case, I mean, he is a young player, don't get me wrong, but I think his ceiling is what it is now. He's a great role player that you can plug and play. He can do a lot of intangibles. The Lakers, for example, I think have, really seen the consequence of not dipping into the luxury tax to retain him. But when it comes to, hey, can he be this star player that carries a franchise? Like, let's not kid ourselves. I don't think he's going to be that guy. So I could also see the Warriors saying no to it. On the Bulls end, if things continue the way they are, where it's just, they're wetting the bed and just not winning, I wouldn't be surprised if they start thinking, okay, let's blow this up and start over. So I could see them, saying yes to this deal.
This is one of those, I'd call this a sleepless night deal. If I'm Myers and I get this call and they've offered this to me, I want to tell them no. I want to hang up immediately, but I couldn't. There's enough value. I'd at least look at it. And that evening I'd have a sleepless night. It'd be hard for me to go one way or the other. Can Caruso shoot? I mean, I know he can play D. I mean, I remember the annoying things. Does he also have an outside shot?
I know he's definitely improved as an outside shooter. And he's not a liability, but he's also not necessarily at the point where he's seen as an asset from that point. His value is his defense and, him doing all the hustle plays, a la like Kevon Looney, but just on the perimeter. And then his playmaking and his on-court chemistry with guys. Like, he is the ultimate plug and play. You can play him with any sort of lineup combination. He's still going to find a way to help the team. But as far as his three-point shooting, look, it's not going to enhance it significantly, but it's also not going to hurt it significantly either.
This is it's either going to go really bad or really well trade. Like if they brought him in and they won a championship with Caruso, it went really well. If they don't, they don't. And Wiseman becomes anything, and history looks back at like, oh, you gave up the number 2 pick for Alex Caruso. Like if on the date of the draft we had given up the rights to James Wiseman and brought back Caruso, there would have been a riot here in the Bay Area. I tell you what, let's swing for the fences. So Maxime, don't start over. This time hit a just trade. And take Caruso out and put in DeMar DeRozan.
Ooh.
All right. So DeMar DeRozan 4. Keep Wiseman in there. Add Kuminga,
Ooh.
Ty Jerome, and Dirty DiVincenzo. All right. Boom. All right. So let's assume, Mark, that everything you just told me is right. That Chicago is panicking. I know DeMar has only one more year left. He's already dealing with trade speculation rumors. Chris Haynes reported something, and it's apparently annoying DeMar. I didn't pull the video. I should have, but on his Instagram account, he threw out a video from training day where Denzel Washington is saying, see this is a newspaper. I use this to tell me stories. And so he's seemingly pissed at these trade rumors. So there's at least, where there's smoke, there's fire. If they do want to do a fire sale, here's a possible deal. Golden State gives up a first rounder, James Wiseman, Kuminga, DiVincenzo, Ty Jerome. What do you think? Who says no? Because DeRozan is a very savvy dude, 3-and-D player, the exact kind of guy perhaps they could use. You pair him in a defensive situation with Wiggins against like Tatum, we're looking pretty good. What do you think, Mark? Who says yes? Who says no?
I think the Warriors say a hard no. I mean, look, DeMar DeRozan's a really great player, great team guy, very savvy offensive player, but I think that there's a lot of redundancy here. Where you still have Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins.
Yep.
How does DeMar DeRozan fit into that puzzle piece? But I think the bigger thing is what the Warriors are giving up, which is a lot of depth and a lot of young guys. And it goes against the grain of what they're trying to do long-term, where, short-term, you're getting a guy who still has some value, but you don't quite know when it's going to start tailing off, as well as, I think questions about how it would fit from a chemistry standpoint. I don't think it would be this drastically bad, but it would be on the same philosophical concerns of what the Lakers did with getting Russell Westbrook, where they trade a bunch of young guys and their depth to get a player that just wasn't a good fit. And I fear, for different reasons, this trade would fall into a similar category.
Especially if he only has 1 year left. Steph, Klay, Draymond, DeMar, and Loon. That's a death lineup. I wouldn't mind if they could get DeMar up to speed and his skill set works within the system. I can see those 5 working, but your description of giving up a slew of young talent, if it's the same kind of thing where, the Lakers are now looking at Ingram and realizing what kind of talent he has, if it's that kind of deal where we give up, Kuminga, who's really showing some promise here, and Wiseman for a 1-year rental, it could be some problems. What do you think, Maxime? I was going for shock and awe here. I thought Mark was gonna be like, holy shit, what a great idea. I might write an article about it. That didn't happen for him. Did I shock you? What do you think? Are you on board for either side?
No, DeMar is the quintessential regular season player to me. He continues to sort of prove his lack of mettle in a postseason context. So I'm a little bit scared about inserting him into any kind of a name of a lineup called Death Lineup. And at this point, frankly, I would prefer to have Kuminga and DiVincenzo on my squad than DeMar. I think, Dante is doing a lot of the hard work that in the places that we need it, when we already have Steph, Klay, and Wiggins to handle some of that offensive load. And Kuminga is just on the up and up. So I'm not interested in leaving those pieces behind.
I've got to take a shot at my death lineup take. I thought that was like a really solid one. But first, you don't compliment the jacket, then you do take shots at my takes. This is not going well, boys. Before I give you this last one, because we got a Judgement Theater coming here, Mark, let's make it more generalized. Bob Myers, you've got a relationship with the Warriors. If he called you and had a frank conversation and said, Mark, do you think we need to make a deal? Should I be looking around? How would you answer that?
Well, first of all, I'd laugh at Bob, be like, you shouldn't be asking me for advice. I have no idea. And then I would also say, hey, I appreciate the phone call. How about you tell me what you're going to do so I can have some information to report on, as opposed to asking me what to do.
Do you think a move is necessary? I mean, you've watched them from afar.
Yeah.
Do they need a shuffle up here, or do they just need some tranquil waters to put shit together?
Yeah, that's the thing. This idea that they should just stand pat, I think, is a little foolish, but also the idea that they should blow it up is just as equally foolish, if not more. So I don't think that outside of, Steph, that, players should be considered untouchable. But when it comes to any potential deals, lean into the trade deadline, it's got to be something that's, kind of tinkering on the margins and doesn't like fundamentally disrupt the whole identity of the team, where all of a sudden you're having to worry about integrating a star player, dealing with a substantial loss of depth. So if there are, single player type deals available, or, maybe 1 for 2, I think that's more advisable than doing this whole fire sale and fundamentally changing the course of everything just for the hopes of turning the season around. And I think the other thing we have to keep in mind when we're talking about the issues here with the Warriors, the longer the season has gone on, my antenna has definitely gone up of, okay, like, how do they turn this around? But the comforting thing that the Warriors have felt, and Warrior fans should feel, is it's not like there's a lot of separation with the rest of the Western Conference. And you can look at it, that means there's a lot of parity in that conference, but there's also a lot of unevenness. I mean, for all the angst that we're talking about here with the Warriors, they're out of the play-in tournament right now, but they're only 5.5 games behind Denver and
Sure.
Memphis for first place. And all it takes is for one of those teams to go on a losing streak, or the Warriors to catch fire, and all of a sudden the game's changed. And when you look specifically at these teams, with Denver and Sacramento specifically, well, Denver, Sacramento, they're, good feel-good stories that I think are threats, but they also don't play well defensively. Minnesota's kind of a hot mess. Dallas and Portland are playing candidates at best. Utah's probably going to be in the lottery once they start making changes to the roster. And then you add the qualifiers to, the Lakers, who are out of the play-in right now, but there's a runway for them to redeem themselves. But there's a lot of questions they have to answer about injuries and roster construction. The Clippers, same issues that they have to answer about injuries. So really, when you eliminate all those teams, it really comes down to Memphis, New Orleans, and Phoenix are really at this point the teams that you really have to worry about long-term, and everything else is up for grabs. And if there's a runway for the Warriors to then finish as a 4th seed and maybe supplant a few of those teams just because of their experience, I mean, I think, there is a setting for all this to sort itself out that way.
Let's go. I'm half expecting to be like, at least that's how I used to think before 2 games ago, and you guys lost in back-to-back 30-point losses. Our final question, boys. All right, and it comes from me. It's Judgement Theater. So I want to imagine yourself as James Wiseman on the plane back from Brooklyn. So, you have just had your best evening as a pro, right? When nobody thought of you. You just went 12 of 14, 30 spot, finally got this monkey off your back. You succeeded on one of the world's biggest stages. Things are going well. But team also just got its ass kicked historically. They just lost by like 1,000, and it's the back-to-back. They just also lost by 30 in the previous game. Okay, so the question is, if you're on that plane, how do you act? Are you happy? Because you just had this incredible performance. Are you super upset? How do you hedge it? Don't answer. Let's judge. Start with me. I'm on that plane. All right, this has just happened. I just had this success, but everybody, I'm sure, is solemn as shit. It's a depressing ride back. What's my affect, boys? What do you think?
I mean, you're gloating, And I think the more that people seem like they're having a bad time, the more you're ramping up. You're gloating.
Yeah, you're playing the YouTube highlights like on endless replay until the plane lands. That's how I envision it.
I'm a terrible loser, like a terrible loser. So there's a chance I'd be really upset, but it'd still be selfish. Like the what we're looking for here is like that team aspect. I should be really upset because everybody else is upset. I might be really upset because we lost, meaning I lost, and I would take it hard. Would there be some internal like happiness? Would I be giving out autographs when people didn't ask for them? Like at the airport, like, oh, here's an autograph, and nobody fucking asked for it at all. Sure, I would do that. And I'd be hella full of myself, but I don't think I'd be openly happy on the plane. Let's move to Maxime. I don't. So I know you'd be very proud of yourself, but you're also aware of your surroundings and would know that everyone would be looking at you pretty closely. I almost feel like you'd be over the top sad. Like you'd come out like, oh, I can't believe we lost those games. Like, fuck this. And everyone would kind of know that it was a little bit over the top. It's too hyperbolic, you know, and they'd be hesitant to believe it. But I think if you were going one way or the other, that's the way you'd hedge. Like, this is the worst night of my life. Like, I can't believe this is going on. Back to back, you'd say, like something like that. What do you think, Mark? What's your judgment here?
Yeah, my judgment is that I think he'd be even keel. Like, I think that he would do all the right things publicly, as far as, you know, taking any compliments graciously, but then saying, hey, I just want to continue to get better, and I also want to help the team win. I think he'd also use this opportunity to show that he's about, you know, the right things. So any conversations that he would have, he would then spin it into, okay, like, how do I make that next step? I think that he would, you know, do the right things and know how to play the cards the right way.
He'd handle it perfectly. So there's two people on that plane. One of us handling it absolute perfectly. The other one with his highlights on YouTube in a loop, just fucking showing it to the world. Maxime, what's the answer? How would you handle it?
What, you know, can I just say what Mark, like, that was so nice, Mark. Thank you. I feel,
Well, I mean,
like,
Yeah, you know, Mark, let me say that too. Thank you, man. I really
Maxime,
appreciate you reading on me. It's really kind of you. Thanks a lot.
Maxime Bram, these are just subjective character analysis here.
Objective? I'm not sure they're objective. Jeez, settle down over there, big man. You haven't gone yet. I can still turn on you terribly. Maxime, what's the truth?
well, I a little bit of a behind the curtain on my own personal life. I'm slowly but surely ramping up to begin the process of getting my pilot's license. And recently, this weekend, just went flying with somebody that has their pilot's license and was showing me a little bit of the ropes of how to make that happen. And when we were in the air, he let me fly the plane for a little bit. And when we got back on the ground, he's like, hey, you know, like, I've let a lot of people like fly the plane for a little bit. Like, you know, you did better than anybody else for your first time. And my response was, well, you know, it's because I've been practicing with the flight simulator, and like, that's it, you know. And that really was my answer. I was like, yeah, of course. It's because I already figured out how to navigate a plane in the air, which feels very different from a car. But then my wife was later, she was like, nice humility there, guy. Like, way to just like pass it off. Yeah.
Dude, that's the verbal equivalent of watching your own highlights on loop on YouTube. Okay, Mark, there you go. I love you for that super honest answer, Maxime and Mark. I mean, your entire conception just got shattered. That's fantastic.
Wow. I guess it's one of those things, you never want to meet your heroes, right? I thought Maxime was just like model citizen. And then I turn out to find out that he's very narcissistic.
He's doing like fucking loops and shit.
I feel like you missed the point of the story.
I know. I was honestly, to placate Bram, I was trying to overcompensate her.
I'm completely placated. Whatever happens now, that story made my my entire week. That leaves to Mark, Maxime. Hard guy to read. So there's no way that Mark would handle it pompously. Like, he would not do that. He's too professional. He'd be on there. But I do think he would be remarkably proud of himself. So my guess of you, Mark, is you would just be quiet. You just wouldn't be upset, but you also wouldn't be like super happy. You would just play it real straightforward. You wouldn't say anything to really anybody. It'd be kind of a silent trip, but inside you'd be replaying your highlights. It just wouldn't be on your phone, you know?
Yeah, or maybe like if you have service on these private planes or something, yeah, I mean, you're like, you know, with iMessages or whatever, you're like texting people off the plane.
That's great.
To get that sort of right. It's like, hey, at least I could celebrate with somebody here, because yeah, you totally know that's not the right thing. And maybe even you're doing some of that overcompensation and like, you're like, man, back to back, like Bram was saying earlier.
Okay, I'm going to shift it. Mark is going to text people, tough night, but he's hoping they text back. But you had a great game, you know, like, and that's why he's shooting out the tough night text. That's my.
You guys were completely on point. I think to bolster what you guys were saying, I would do all the things you said that I would be with everyone else on the plane. I would save the watching the highlights and the messages for once I get off the plane. But internally, I would be replaying the highlight reel in my head over and over again.
I'd have a medallion, like a giant necklace, but instead of a medallion, it'd just be a television screen of my highlights as I walk out. Oh, well, this? Oh, no, that is me. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for noticing. Mark, we're going to land the plane right at the 45-minute mark. I am proud of us, dude. We missed you. Happy holidays. It was phenomenal having you back. Congratulations on all the incredible news with you. And for people who need way more Medina in their life, where do they go?
Well, Brad, Maxime, always appreciate being on with you guys. Where they can go. I mean, first of all, it's the Warriors Huddle Pod. I'm always here, every so often, and always love coming back. Hopefully the invitations keep extending,
Of
but
course, dude.
my main place is NBA.com. I do TV work with NBA TV, Spectrum Sportsnet in LA, Fox Sports as well. And then on the radio side, Fox Sports Radio. And I can't give away the spoilers yet because it hasn't been published, but I have a piece coming out on Marcus Smart before the Christmas Day games.
Nice.
And it has some Warrior references, and I think you guys will enjoy them a little bit.
Is it entitled "Why Marcus Smart is the Dirtiest Player in the League"? Don't tell us, dude. We'll figure it out when it comes out for us. You want to shoot us an email? Let us know we did a good job, bad job. Get us some questions. Anything. You can shoot that email to
huddle@warriorshuddle.com.
that fancy ass graphic at the bottom. Our Twitter account has been switched. It is now at Bram's Incredible Highlights. You can check that out anywhere. No, it is at Warriors Huddle. With that in mind, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, the whole 9 yards, and hopefully we'll see you real soon.